Part 1. The moment Scorpio walks in and the room remembers. There are moments in life when the air itself seems to shift. You don't hear footsteps, yet you feel presence. You can't explain it, but something or someone just entered the room and everything inside of you notices. That is the Scorpio effect. It's not because of what they're wearing. It's not a rehearsed performance. In fact, Scorpio rarely tries to be noticed at all. And yet, people turn. Heads lift. Conversations pause. Eyes follow. Why? Because when Scorpio walks in, their presence enters first, not just the body. Their aura presses in on the space like a tide coming in, unannounced but unstoppable. It's not loud. It's not flamboyant. It's something far more powerful. It's silent certainty. It's a gravitational pull that exists even before words are exchanged. And just like that, the atmosphere changes. Not because Scorpio demands attention, but because they are built of it. Crystal ball Scorpio presence is not performance. It is alignment. Let's take a step back. In Buddhist teachings, the concept of theta, or suchness, represents ultimate presence, the essence of being unfiltered, unmasked, and absolutely still. Scorpio, in its highest form, carries this suchness into every interaction. It does not need approval. It does not need to impress. Scorpio doesn't ask, "Am I enough?" Scorpio knows. That's where the magnetism is born. From inner clarity, not outer effort. You see, most people in today's world walk around projecting versions of themselves. Masks, personas, layers, all carefully curated. But Scorpio? They walk as themselves. And that kind of raw authenticity is not only rare, it's disruptive. Because it forces others to see their own masks, just by standing next to someone who wears none. Scorpio's stillness is a form of rebellion in a noisy, overexposed world. Waxing crescent moon, I remember the first Scorpio I met. Let me tell you a story. I was 22, idealistic, naive, and talking too much. I walked into a workshop in Kyoto, a mindfulness retreat, eager to prove how spiritual I was becoming. And then she walked in, a woman dressed in black linen. No name tag, no smile, just presence. She didn't say a word, but the energy shifted. I noticed the room stopped. My heart did too. Later, during a group session, someone asked her a difficult question. How do you deal with grief that has no end? She didn't answer right away. She waited, then looked directly at the person and said, "You breathe. You don't fix. You feel." And eventually, grief becomes part of your wisdom. It was simple, direct, deep. Everyone was silent. That's when I knew. She was Scorpio. Fire-wise, Scorpio's entrance is unforgettable. When we speak of Scorpio entrances, we're not talking about fashion or spectacle. We're speaking of energy, and energy doesn't lie. You could be in a room full of successful people, charming people, loud people, and then the Scorpio arrives. Suddenly, it's not about charisma. It's about gravity. There is something ancient in their gaze. A look that seems to say, "I've seen more than I'll ever speak. And I see through you too." And yet, this is not judgment. It's recognition. Like meeting someone who has walked through the same fire as you, but emerged with grace. You don't even know why, but you trust them. You respect them. You feel them. Scorpio doesn't perform connection. They embody it. They don't say, "I understand." They prove it, without a word. Man in lotus position, the Buddhist mirror, stillness as power. There's a Zen story I often think of when I try to describe Scorpio's energy. A young monk once asked his master, "What is the greatest act of strength?" The master replied, "To sit still in chaos and not flinch." This is Scorpio. They walk through storms and carry none of it on their face. They feel deeply, but you wouldn't know it unless they let you. And when they do, it's not weakness. It's sacred. Because unlike many, Scorpio does not run from pain. They walk into it, sit with it, and come back with answers most of us are too afraid to seek. That's why the moment they walk in, you feel it. Because something in your soul recognizes the warrior cloaked in stillness. Thought balloon, pause and reflect for the viewer. Ask yourself, when was the last time you walked into a room and felt seen without explanation? When was the last time your presence spoke more than your words? Scorpio teaches us that the most powerful introductions aren't made by our mouths. They're made by our essence. Brain spiritual takeaway for part 1. Scorpio entrances are unforgettable not because of attention-seeking, but because of alignment. Their presence is not decoration, it's declaration. They don't announce themselves to the world. The world adjusts itself around their arrival. And maybe, just maybe, it's time we stopped asking, how do I stand out? And started asking, how do I become so grounded in who I am that I no longer need to? Part 2. The mystery behind the gaze. Scorpio's eyes see what you hide. There are eyes that look, and then there are eyes that see. When a Scorpio looks at you, it doesn't feel like being seen in the ordinary sense. It feels like someone just reached past the smile on your lips, the outfit on your body, the persona you've crafted, and touched the part of you even you don't fully understand. It's like they read your story in a second and still waited for you to tell it. This is the Scorpio gaze, and it is legendary. But why? Why does a simple look from a Scorpio carry so much weight, awaken so much vulnerability, and feel so impossible to escape? Let's explore. Magnifying glass tilted left more than vision, a kind of soul recognition. Astrologers often speak of Scorpio eyes as penetrating, hypnotic, even unsettling. But if you've ever truly been looked at by a Scorpio, you know it's not about intimidation. It's about intimacy. Deep, almost uncomfortable intimacy. You suddenly feel stripped of your defenses. Not judged, but known. There's something ancient in their gaze, like they're not just seeing you now, but every version of you you've ever been. Your pain, your joy, your lies, your light. It's as if they say, without words, you don't have to hide. I've already seen it. Woman in lotus position, a Buddhist lens, the eyes as mirrors of awareness. In Buddhist teachings, there's a practice called vipassana, or insight meditation. It means seeing things as they truly are, not as we want them to be, not as we fear, just truth, clear and unsentimental. Scorpio carries this kind of insight naturally. Their gaze is vipassana in motion. They don't look at you hoping to be pleased. They don't look to validate a version of you that makes them feel good. They look because they want to know, and not just the bright parts. They want the shadows. They want the truth. And when they get it, they stay. This is one of Scorpio's greatest spiritual powers, their capacity to witness the full spectrum of another human without flinching. Light bulb real-life story. My friend Theo, the quiet Scorpio. I once had a Scorpio friend named Theo. He rarely spoke. When he did, it was in short, measured phrases. But his eyes, they never blinked. Not in a threatening way. In a curious, observing way. As if every person he met was a landscape he was slowly learning to read. One night, we were at a small gathering. A friend broke down, admitting they felt like a failure in life, despite their smiling social media posts, their curated public image. As people offered sympathy or tried to cheer them up, Theo said nothing. But he moved closer, looked this friend directly in the eyes, and whispered, "You don't have to hold it all together here." The friend collapsed into tears. No fixing, no cliches, just presence. That's Scorpio. They see the moment you can no longer pretend, and they don't turn away. Performing arts. Why this gaze makes people nervous and addicted. Scorpio eyes challenge your performance. In a world where we've been trained to look the part, Scorpio asks, but who are you without the part? This is why many people find Scorpio's energy intense. Because let's face it, most people don't want to be truly seen. They want to be approved of. They want applause, not exposure. But Scorpio doesn't give you approval. They give you reflection. It's raw. It's honest. It's sacred. And once you've felt it, it's addictive. Because deep down, we're all tired of wearing masks. We're all craving to be seen without shame. Dizzy sacred gaze versus superficial glance. Let's be clear. Scorpio's gaze is not checking you out. It's not flirtation in the usual sense. There's no empty charm here. No careless wandering eyes. Scorpio doesn't glance. They study. They look with intention. They look into meaning. To be caught in their gaze is to be reminded that you are more than your roles, more than your wounds, more than your image. You are a soul, and they see it. Wheel of Dharma spiritual reflection. Can you hold someone like that? There's a Zen teaching that says, to truly love someone, you must see them as they are, not as you want them to be. Scorpio teaches us this by example. They don't need you to be easy, cheerful, or polished. They just need you to be honest. So ask yourself, can you hold space like that for someone? Can you look at someone's grief, their shame, their secrets, and not turn away? This is what makes Scorpio unforgettable. Not just because of how they look at you, but because of what they awaken in you. They awaken the longing to be seen, and the courage to be real. Part 3. The power of stillness when Scorpio speaks without a word. There are voices that roar. There are gestures that dominate. And then there is stillness, the kind that fills the room without movement, the kind that makes silence louder than any speech. This is Scorpio's power. You may not notice them first. They might be seated in the corner of a gathering, sipping something slowly, saying little, watching everything. And yet, somehow, your attention drifts to them and stays. It's not because they're trying. It's because they're rooted. In a world where everyone is rushing to be heard, Scorpio's refusal to compete for attention becomes the very reason why you can't look away. Person lotus position stillness is not emptiness, it's mastery. There's a false belief that silence equals weakness, that if you're not speaking, you're invisible, that if you're not expressing, you're not feeling. Scorpio defies this. Their silence is not avoidance. It is containment. Their quiet is not detachment. It is depth. They do not share to fill space. They share when it matters. This is emotional discipline, a form of spiritual maturity rarely seen. It's the kind of energy that Buddhist monks cultivate through decades of meditation, not to escape life, but to anchor more deeply into it. Scorpio often arrives at this stillness not through monastic practice, but through pain, through loss, through watching the world fall apart and learning to remain standing. Open Book: A Story of Stillness and Crisis. Years ago, I witnessed a Scorpio friend named May during a crisis at her workplace. An unexpected betrayal unfolded. A colleague publicly threw her under the bus during a board meeting, blaming her for a failed project. The room went tense. People expected an explosion, a defense, at the very least, an argument. But May didn't flinch. She sat still, listened, and when the time came, she said one sentence. "If the truth needs time to reveal itself, I'm not in a hurry." No panic, no pleading, just presence. 2 weeks later, the truth did come out. And May's reputation didn't just survive, it rose. Why? Because stillness speaks more powerfully than noise. And Scorpio knows this. Man in lotus position, the Zen mirror, Wu Wei, and Scorpio's flow. In Taoist and Zen philosophy, there's a concept called Wu Wei, effortless action. It means doing without forcing, influencing without pushing. Scorpio embodies Wu Wei in emotional spaces. They don't force connection. They don't chase validation. They don't beg for understanding. Instead, they hold their ground with quiet confidence. And from that grounded stillness, others are drawn in. Like gravity, like nightfall, like a sacred pause in the middle of chaos. Stillness reveals truth. People often talk too much to hide what they don't want others to see. But Scorpio? They already see, so there's no need for noise. That's what makes their silence so powerful. You can't lie in their presence, not because they interrogate, but because their very being acts as a mirror. It reflects the gap between who you are and who you pretend to be. And that reflection changes people. Woman lotus position, a practice for you. Sacred stillness. Try this. The next time you enter a room, resist the urge to speak immediately. Breathe, observe, listen, and ask yourself, what would Scorpio do? Scorpio wouldn't rush. Scorpio wouldn't explain unnecessarily. Scorpio would read the room and wait. In that waiting, in that grounded presence, a strange thing happens. You begin to command attention, not by performing, but by being. Bubbaloon stillness is a choice few make, but all respect. There's an old Buddhist teaching. The tree that remains still during the storm becomes the shelter for others. That's Scorpio. They've been through the storm and chose to remain rooted. Their stillness is not passivity. It's protection. It's perception. It's power. And in a world obsessed with quick reactions and shallow declarations, this kind of depth isn't just rare, it's revolutionary. Part 4. Sexual energy versus sacred presence. The Scorpio mystery unveiled. Let's address the obvious. When people talk about Scorpio, there's always that whisper, the sly grin, the raised eyebrow, the unspoken assumption that Scorpio is the sexiest sign. And sure, astrology associates Scorpio with the 8th house, the realm of sex, death, and transformation. But if you stop there, if you reduce Scorpio to simple seduction, you miss the real secret. Scorpio's true magnetism isn't carnal. It's cosmic. This isn't about raw sexuality. It's about life force and how Scorpio channels it with sacred precision. Fire more than attraction. This is initiation. Sexual energy is often misunderstood. People think it's about touch, chemistry, physicality. But the ancient mystics knew better. From tantric sages in India to Zen monks in Japan, sexuality wasn't just body-based. It was energy-based. Scorpio carries this frequency naturally. When a Scorpio looks at you, touches you, speaks to you with intention, you don't just feel arousal. You feel activation. Something in you wakes up. Something you forgot you had. And that awakening isn't always comfortable. Because Scorpio doesn't flirt to flatter. They connect to transform. Man in lotus position Buddhist parallel, Kundalini, desire, and awakening. In Tantric Buddhist teachings, Kundalini is described as a coiled serpent resting at the base of the spine, representing dormant spiritual energy. When awakened, it rises, burning away illusion, ego, and detachment as it ascends toward enlightenment. Sound familiar? That's what Scorpio does. They awaken your Kundalini, not always physically, but spiritually. Their presence stirs the parts of you that have long been asleep: creativity, purpose, emotional depth, the hunger for intimacy that transcends flesh. Their desire doesn't say, "I want your body." It says, "I want your truth." Fire a real story when presence becomes prayer. I remember a Scorpio healer I once met in Chiang Mai, Thailand. She didn't advertise herself. Her practice was entirely word of mouth. I was told, she doesn't just work on the body, she rewires the soul. When I met her, she didn't touch me. She just sat in front of me, looked into my eyes. And after a minute of silence, she said, "You carry grief in your lower back, a loss you haven't spoken about. Let it speak through breath." I broke. That session didn't involve massage or manipulation. It was presence, focused, still, deep. When I walked away, I felt lighter, open, realigned. That's sacred Scorpio energy. Not seductive, not performative, transformative. Milky Way Scorpio energy is embodied, not displayed. Scorpio doesn't try to be sexy. They don't need to. They embody Eros, not in the cheap, commercial sense, but in the divine sense. Their movements are deliberate. Their words are precise. Their energy is intense, even when they're still. And that's what makes them unforgettable. Because you don't feel like they're trying to impress you. You feel like they're inviting you into something deeper, into yourself. Speech balloon: how Scorpio communicates desire. Unlike signs that flirt with charm and wit, Scorpio's communication is subtle, often nonverbal. A lingering glance, a shift in posture, a moment of prolonged silence, where you feel more in that pause than in an entire conversation. They don't rush. They don't chase. They allow the energy to build, and that makes it sacred. Because in Scorpio's world, connection is not about conquest. It's about communion. Person Lotus position the Tantric path, Scorpio as a mirror of sacred union. There's a profound lesson here, especially for those walking a spiritual path. True union is not in possession. It is in presence. Scorpio teaches this with every encounter. Whether physical or platonic, their connections carry depth, gravity, ritual. They remind us that desire is holy, not something to be feared or suppressed, but something to be channeled with wisdom. When Scorpio loves, it's not for attention. It's for transformation. When Scorpio touches, it's not for play. It's for alchemical fusion. And when they leave, you don't forget the pleasure. You remember the awakening. The balloon reflection for you. Are you present when you love? Let's be honest. In today's world, we're taught to get love, to attract it, maintain it, chase it. But rarely are we taught to embody love. To be fully present with another, not to fix, not to impress, but to witness and honor. Scorpio does that. Their love is quiet but seismic, private but all-consuming, sacred but deeply human. And if you've ever felt it, you know it doesn't go away. It lives inside you like a candle that never extinguishes, even if the room goes dark. Part 5. To love a Scorpio is to be transformed. There are relationships that soothe. There are relationships that comfort. And then, there are relationships that burn away everything that isn't real. That's what it's like to love a Scorpio. To enter into a bond with them is not like stepping into a warm bath. It's like walking in a sacred fire. You don't walk out the same. You walk out changed, sometimes shaken, sometimes scorched, but always reborn. Because loving a Scorpio isn't about romance. It's about revelation. Fire Scorpio love is a mirror and a trial. Scorpio doesn't do shallow. They can't. It's not in their nature. If they fall for you, they will see you, not just your smile or your resume, but your wounds, your patterns, your hidden fears. And they will challenge them, not through words, but through energy. You'll find that your usual defenses don't work. Your charm won't distract them. Your excuses won't pacify them. Because they're not here to be impressed. They're here to know you. Deeply, uncomfortably, completely. And in that process, something inside you begins to awaken. Real story. The man who didn't know he was hiding. A student once told me about the woman he loved, a Scorpio named Liana. He said, "I thought I had my life together. I had the job, the house, the plans. But when I was with her, I felt like she was asking questions I'd spent my whole life avoiding, without even speaking." Liana didn't tell him who to be. She simply lived in such truth that his illusions started to crumble. "She didn't change me with pressure," he said. "She changed me by being so real that I couldn't be fake anymore." And that's the thing. Scorpio doesn't transform you with force. They transform you with presence. Broken heart, why it's not easy to love a Scorpio. Let's be honest. Scorpio love is not for everyone. Why? Because it demands authenticity. And authenticity is terrifying when you've spent your life building an image to survive. Scorpio won't ask for perfection, but they will demand truth. And for many, that's harder to give. You might find yourself confronting old trauma, reevaluating choices, questioning desires you thought were solid. This is not chaos. This is cleansing. Scorpio's love is like a mirror, and it reflects all of you, not just the parts you like. And that's where healing begins. Person in lotus position from the Buddhist lens, love is a path of liberation. In Buddhist practice, love is not attachment. Love is liberation, a practice of freeing both self and other from delusion. Scorpio understands this intuitively. They do not want to possess you. They want to see you and be seen in return. They want to break down the walls you didn't even know you built. Their love is not decorative. It is sacred confrontation. Just like the flame that burns away impurities in gold, Scorpio love burns away what's false in you to reveal your truest essence. Waxing crescent moon, the descent. Before you rise, you must fall. One of Scorpio's karmic patterns is that they often lead others into shadow, not to harm them, but to guide them. Many people who've loved a Scorpio describe a period of falling apart, a breakup that shattered their worldview, a truth that they couldn't ignore, a sudden need to confront the self they'd avoided. And yet, after the storm, came light. Scorpio love teaches that the breakdown is part of the breakthrough. It's the descent before the rise, the night before the new dawn, the death before the rebirth. And in that journey, they hold your hand, even if they walk ahead in silence. Lightbulb, are you ready to be seen? Most people say they want to be loved deeply, but what they really want is to be admired. Scorpio doesn't do admiration. They do awakening. So if you're drawn to a Scorpio, ask yourself, do I want to be loved, or do I want to be transformed? Because Scorpio will not love the mask. They will only love what's real. And when you give them that, the raw, the wounded, the wild, they don't run. They revere it. They don't need you to be perfect. They just need you to be true. Woman in lotus position, spiritual takeaway, love that evolves the soul. In Buddhism, there is a word, upaya, skillful means. It refers to the idea that different souls need different paths to wake up. Some need peace, some need silence, and some need Scorpio. Scorpio is not your gentle path. They are your fire, your storm, your sacred teacher disguised as a lover. To love them is to enter the temple of truth, to be broken and built again, not into who you were, but into who you were meant to become. Part 6. The Phoenix Path, Death, Rebirth, and the Sacred Fire of Scorpio. If there is one archetype that defines Scorpio more than any other, it is not the scorpion. It is not even the eagle. It is the phoenix, the mythical bird that dies in flames and rises anew from its own ashes. And no symbol better captures the truth of Scorpio's life path. To burn, to break, to become more. Not once, but over and over again. Fire Scorpio doesn't fear the end, they become it. Most people resist endings. They cling to routines, identities, relationships, and illusions long past their expiration date. But Scorpio? They walk straight into endings. They don't just accept change, they initiate it. They know instinctively that what no longer serves must die for something greater to be born. This is the Phoenix path, to allow the self to disintegrate so the soul can evolve. It's painful, lonely, humbling. But for Scorpio, it's necessary. Coffin the symbolic death, more than just letting go. Scorpio's deaths are not always dramatic or visible. Often, they happen quietly inside. The death of ego, the death of an old identity, the death of an outdated belief or bond. I once knew a Scorpio writer who spent years building a public career. But when her words no longer felt true, she deleted everything. Every blog, every video, every post. People called her reckless. She said, "If my soul doesn't live in it anymore, I refuse to let the ghost of me continue performing." That's Scorpio. They don't fake their own resurrection. They make the fire and step into it. Man in lotus position in Buddhist wisdom, death is not the end, it's the doorway. In Buddhist philosophy, death is not feared. It is a transition, a dissolution of form so that consciousness can evolve. When we speak of ego death in meditation, we refer to the moment where your identity, your name, your story, your mask dissolves, and all that's left is pure awareness. Scorpio walks this ego death again and again, not just in silence, but in life. They kill the parts of themselves that become false. They don't wait for life to strip them down. They do it with intention. That's the essence of the Phoenix path. Death is not destruction. It is sacred preparation for what's next. Firecracker. Why most people fear Scorpio? They see the fire. Let's be honest. Most people don't fear Scorpio because they're dangerous. They fear Scorpio because they can see the falsehood in others. They carry fire in their soul, and fire reveals. You can't hide your unresolved emotions, your insecurities, your secret longings around Scorpio. Their presence brings them to the surface, not to shame you, but to set them free. But freedom isn't easy. It requires surrender. And that's what Scorpio's fire demands. Surrender the illusion or be consumed by it. Fire. A true story. The breakup that birthed a new self. A friend once told me about her breakup with a Scorpio man. It wasn't that he was cruel, she said. It was that he made me see myself in a way I couldn't unsee. She told him she wanted commitment. He asked her, "Do you want love? Or do you want security disguised as love?" The relationship ended, but something in her began. She quit her job, started therapy, moved to a new city, began painting again. And one day she told me, "I used to think he broke my heart, but now I know he broke the walls around it." That's what Scorpio does. They don't just love you, they birth you. Woman lotus position the sacred fire within you. You don't need to be a Scorpio to walk the Phoenix path. You just need to be willing to let the parts of you that no longer serve burn. Ask yourself, what version of me needs to die for my truth to live? What have I outgrown, but still clinged out of fear? Am I ready to stop surviving and start transforming? Scorpio doesn't walk the Phoenix path for glory. They walk it because they can't do otherwise. But in doing so, they give others permission to fall apart, to rise again, to be reborn into truth. Bell spiritual takeaway: the fire is not your enemy. In the teachings of Tibetan Buddhism, the fire element is not just destruction. It is purification. It burns away illusion, ego, and karma to reveal the eternal flame beneath. Scorpio carries that flame. And if you let them, if you love them, or simply learn from them, they will teach you how to rise. Not by pretending, not by resisting, but by surrendering fully to the sacred fire that knows exactly what to burn and what to save. Part 7. The Sacred Shadow: Why Scorpio Embraces What Others Fear. In a world obsessed with light, Scorpio walks into the dark. Where others flinch, they look closer. Where others run, they sit down and listen. Where others numb, they feel deeply, unflinchingly, and fully. Scorpio is not here to bypass pain. Scorpio is here to transform it. And they don't do it with platitudes. They do it with presence. Because Scorpio understands one thing most people don't want to admit. The shadow isn't the enemy. It's the part of us most desperate to be healed. Waxing crescent moon. What is the shadow, really? In Jungian psychology, the shadow is the part of ourselves we hide, repress, or deny: the jealousy, the rage, the shame, the desire we were told is too much or unacceptable. But in Buddhist thought, particularly in the teachings on the 5 hindrances, desire, ill will, laziness, restlessness, and doubt, these aspects of ourselves are not rejected. They are observed with mindfulness and compassion. Scorpio lives that truth. They don't reject the shadow. They invite it to speak. And in doing so, they become mirrors for others, not of who they pretend to be, but of who they truly are. Brick. A story: the woman who held my grief. Years ago, I lost someone I loved. I kept showing up to work, smiling, functioning, but inside, I was in pieces. A Scorpio friend named Eric came to visit. We sat in silence for almost 20 minutes. No small talk, no distraction. Then she said, "You don't have to be okay right now. I can sit with your grief if you let me." I broke down. She didn't flinch. She didn't fix. She just stayed. That was the first time I realized Scorpio doesn't fear your darkness. Because they've made peace with their own. Man in lotus position, why most people avoid the shadow and why Scorpio doesn't. We live in a culture of bypassing. Don't be sad, be grateful. Don't be angry, be polite. Don't talk about the past, move on. But Scorpio knows that you can't heal what you won't face. They know that real peace doesn't come from avoiding the dark. It comes from integrating it, bringing it into the light, not to shame it, but to understand it. This is the Scorpio gift. They guide people through their shadows, not with force, but with presence. Fire, why this makes them magnetic. Scorpio's allure is not just physical. It's psychic. You feel that they know you, the whole of you, and don't turn away. And that kind of acceptance is rare. It makes people feel seen in ways they've never experienced. It makes people feel safe enough to be real. In a world that only celebrates perfection, Scorpio makes imperfection sacred. Yin-Yang Buddhist wisdom, facing suffering as a gate to awakening. In Mahayana Buddhism, suffering is not to be rejected, it's to be understood. The Four Noble Truths begin by acknowledging dukkha, the inherent unsatisfactoriness of life. Scorpio doesn't avoid this truth. They live in it. And because of that, they often become healers, not by title, but by nature. Their presence becomes a refuge for others. Not because they have answers, but because they've walked the dark and returned with light. Woman Lotus Position Reflection. What are you still hiding? Ask yourself. What emotion are you afraid to admit, even to yourself? What part of your story do you avoid because it still hurts? Who have you never allowed to see the real you? Scorpio teaches us that freedom doesn't come from perfection. It comes from wholeness, from honoring every part of ourselves, the kind, the cruel, the broken, the beautiful. Candle Scorpio as the soul companion in shadow work. Some signs cheer you on from the light. Scorpio walks with you through the dark, not as a rescuer, not as a fixer, but as a companion, fierce, loyal, and unwavering. And when you emerge, you don't just feel better. You feel reborn because someone saw your worst and stayed. Part 8. Loyalty written in fire. Why Scorpio bonds are eternal. Some people promise loyalty. Scorpio becomes it. To love a Scorpio, or to be loved by one, is to enter a covenant, one not spoken, but deeply felt. Their loyalty isn't casual. It's carved in the marrow of their being, etched into their emotional DNA. This is not a zodiac trait. This is a soul vow. And once it's made, it doesn't disappear with time. It doesn't dissolve in distance. It doesn't fade in silence. It burns on, through everything. Fire Scorpio doesn't choose lightly, but when they do, it's for real. Scorpio is selective by nature. They don't open their hearts easily, and they don't form connections on impulse. To them, a bond is not entertainment, it's a sacred investment. And that's why their loyalty is rare. Because it isn't born of duty. It's born of recognition. They don't just love the version of you you show to the world. They love the version you hide, and once they choose that version, they hold on. Through your breakdowns, through your bad decisions, through your silence. If you are theirs, they protect you with fire. Shield, a true story. The Scorpio who stayed when no one else did. I once met a man who had spiraled into addiction after his divorce. He lost friends, lost work, lost himself. But one person stayed, his younger sister. A Scorpio. She drove into rehab, sat outside for hours when he refused to speak. And when he relapsed, she didn't shame him. She just said, "I'm not here because you're easy. I'm here because you're mine." That's the essence of Scorpio loyalty. It's not fragile. It's fierce. It doesn't waver because things get hard. It shows up because things got hard. Broken heart but betrayal? That's a different story. Let's not romanticize this too much. Because the other side of that loyalty is wrath, not out of ego, but because Scorpio gives everything and expects the same. They don't love halfway. So when they are lied to, used, or betrayed, it cuts at the core. And they don't seek revenge like a villain in a movie. They withdraw their soul. They vanish from your body, your heart, your memory. They may never curse your name, but you'll never forget the silence they leave behind. Woman Lotus Position Buddhist Reflection. Right relationship and sacred boundaries. In Buddhist ethics, loyalty is not blind attachment. It's wise companionship, the ability to walk alongside others with compassion while remaining anchored in truth. Scorpio's loyalty, at its highest vibration, reflects this. It's not codependency. It's devotion with discernment. They will go through the fire for you, but they will not stay in a lie. Their loyalty comes from the soul, not from social obligation. Fire, why their loyalty is both a blessing and a mirror. Scorpio doesn't just love you. They hold you to your highest. And that can be uncomfortable. Because when you are loved by Scorpio, you know when you're not being real, and so do they. They will call out your avoidance. They will feel your emotional shift. They will sense your dishonesty, even if you smile. But they don't do this to control. They do it to protect the integrity of the bond. They need to trust you, not just in action, but in energy. Lock the soul contract. Why you never forget a Scorpio bond. Even if you part ways. Even if life leads you in different directions. Even if years pass in silence. If you were truly loved by a Scorpio, that energy stays with you. You'll feel it in moments of doubt. You'll hear their voice when you're about to lie to yourself. You'll remember the way they held your pain without looking away. Because Scorpio loyalty doesn't die. It becomes part of your internal architecture. It leaves fingerprints on your soul. The balloon reflection for you. Are you capable of that kind of loyalty? We live in a world of easy exits. Ghosting. Quick replacements. Superficial bonds. But Scorpio reminds us of an ancient truth. To truly stand by another soul in their light and in their chaos is not ordinary. It is sacred. So ask yourself, do I love only when it's easy? Do I stand by others without needing recognition? Am I willing to commit to truth even when it hurts? Because Scorpio doesn't want fairy tales. They want eternal truths. And they'll give you theirs if you're brave enough to receive it. Part 9. The archetype of the alchemist. Why Scorpio transforms everything they touch. There are people who walk into your life and leave no trace. And then there are Scorpios who enter quietly, but leave you forever changed. Not because they force you, not because they try to, but because their presence is transformative. Scorpio is the archetypal alchemist, the one who turns pain into power, shadow into light, endings into evolution. Where others seek to escape discomfort, Scorpio leans in, and in doing so, they become a living mirror for everyone around them. Fire alchemist of the soul. In ancient times, alchemists were said to transform base metals into gold. But the truest alchemists knew the real gold was within. The transformation was spiritual. Scorpio lives this truth. They don't just survive their traumas, they metabolize them. Grief becomes compassion. Betrayal becomes wisdom. Loss becomes vision. And because they know how to die and be reborn emotionally, spiritually, and energetically, they teach others, just by being who they are. Lightbulb real story. From burnout to breakthrough. I once coached a woman who had burned out in her corporate job. Everything looked fine from the outside, but inside, she was hollowed out. Then she met a Scorpio colleague, a quiet man named Eli. He didn't push. He didn't give advice. He just asked questions no one else dared to ask. What would you do if you weren't afraid? What parts of your life feel fake? When did you stop trusting yourself? 3 months later, she resigned. Not out of impulse, out of clarity. She launched a project she had buried for years. I don't know what happened, she told me. He didn't change me. But being around him made me realize I couldn't lie to myself anymore. That's Scorpio's magic. They don't do the work for you. They simply create the energetic field where truth becomes unavoidable. Person Lotus Position Buddhist Parallel, the fire that purifies. In Vajrayana Buddhism, fire is not destructive, it's purifying. In tantric rituals, the flame represents transformation, burning away illusion, ego, and karmic residue to reveal pure awareness. Scorpio is that fire. They challenge you, not to harm you, but to free you. They expose the parts of you that are still hiding, still clinging, still afraid to evolve. And while it's uncomfortable, it's also liberating. They won't hand you a map, but they'll light the match and trust you to walk through the fire. Milky Way. Why people evolve around Scorpio. Because Scorpio doesn't tolerate pretense. Their very presence makes you more aware of your own masks. Around them, you notice what you're pretending to feel, where you're shrinking to please others, what truths you've been afraid to say even to yourself. And suddenly, you can't keep living in illusion. You either rise or retreat. But one thing is certain, you won't be the same. Test tube. Scorpio's energy is a catalyst. In science, a catalyst is a substance that causes change without being changed itself. Scorpio often plays that role in relationships, workplaces, even families. They arrive, and things begin to shift. People confess things they've hidden. Old patterns break. Hidden truths surface. And it's not because Scorpio demands it. It's because Scorpio embodies truth, and truth activates truth. That's the essence of alchemy. Woman Lotus Position Reflection. Are you ready for transformation? Many people say they want to grow, but few are ready to release the old version of themselves. Scorpio challenges you to ask, am I clinging to a comfort zone that's killing my soul? What illusions am I still protecting? What pain have I not yet alchemized into purpose? If you've ever loved a Scorpio, you've felt this. If you've ever been mentored by one, you've lived it. And if you are one, you are it. You are the fire, the change, the sacred storm. Candle spiritual takeaway, presence as a path of transformation. Scorpio doesn't transform others by being loud. They do it by being true. Their power isn't in domination, it's in depth. Their impact isn't in noise, it's in knowing. And when you meet that energy, whether in a conversation, a glance, or a silence, something in your soul responds. It's time to become who I really am. Part 10, Why You'll Never Forget a Scorpio, the Final Truth. There are people you meet and forget by next week. There are others who stay for a while and fade gently into the background. But then there are the Scorpios. Once you've known one, truly known one, you carry their presence with you like an echo. Not because they tried to leave a mark, but because they're the mark. Fire. What makes Scorpio unforgettable isn't what you think. It's not the mystery, not the magnetism, not even the sex appeal. It's the truth they carry and the permission they give you to face your own. In a world that asks you to smile, to conform, to stay small, Scorpio walks in and reminds you that you are fire, you are soul, you are meant to evolve. And suddenly, you feel yourself waking up. That's not charisma, that's impact. Person Lotus positions Scorpio as a spiritual archetype. In the path of Buddhist wisdom, we talk often about teachers. Some teach through words, some teach through silence, and a rare few teach through being. Scorpio is one of those. Their presence, when lived from alignment, becomes a living transmission of depth in a world addicted to surface, of devotion in a time of distraction, of transformation in a culture of stagnation. They don't guide you gently. They ignite you. They call you out of comfort and into truth. Stop sign. That's why people either run from them or rise around them. Not everyone can hold the Scorpio frequency. Not everyone wants to. Some will call it too much. Others will call it intense. But those who are ready, those who are willing to shed their masks, will remember Scorpio forever. Because for the first time in their lives, someone looked at them and didn't ask them to perform. Someone saw through the pain and didn't flinch. Someone dared to say, I see you. I won't look away. DNA. A final story. The stranger in the storm. Let me end with this. There's a woman I met during a silent retreat. She sat 2 mats away from me for 7 days. We never spoke, but there was something about her stillness, her gaze, her energy. I felt safe near her. On the last day, she approached me and said, I hope you find what you came here to let go of. Then she walked away. I never got her name, but I remember that moment to this day. She was a Scorpio. Woman Lotus position. What Scorpio asks of you. Scorpio doesn't ask you to worship them. They ask you to wake up, to stop playing small, to stop fearing your shadow, to start burning away the layers that aren't real. They don't want followers. They want fellow warriors, people brave enough to look inward and rise. So whether you're a Scorpio, loved one, or are simply touched by their energy, let their fire remind you of your own. Bell spiritual takeaway. The real reason Scorpio turns heads. Scorpio doesn't walk into a room and ask to be noticed. They walk into a room and shift the frequency. They don't perform. They resonate. They don't impress. They reveal. And in doing so, they don't just turn heads. They turn souls back toward truth. Red Heart. Final call to action from the heart. If you've ever been seen by a Scorpio, you know what I mean. If you are a Scorpio, this is your reminder. Your path is not easy, but it is sacred. And if this journey touched something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Sparkles. Share this video with someone who needs to remember who they are. Sparkles. Leave a comment with the moment you felt the Scorpio effect. Sparkles. And most of all, subscribe to the path to Buddhist wisdom, where truth is honored, shadows are welcome, and the soul always comes first. Because once you've met the fire of Scorpio, you never forget the heat. ***.